Welcome back to RamyWorks 360. Every deployment has stories. Some about firefights, rockets, patrols, but years later, the stories that remember are often the most ridiculous ones. This project was inspired by a friend of mine who spent time on a small combat outpost in Iraq. And some jobs were better than others. Unfortunately for this private, this wasn't one of them. I started with a small, simple piece of insulation foam. Since this scene takes place in Afghanistan, I wanted a dry, dusty environment with a couple HESCO barriers forming the backdrop. Every diorama starts with a plan. I cut a small piece of insulation foam for the base and began arranging the HESCO barriers, figure, and burn barrel to see how the scene would come together. I wanted the figure to be the focal point, with the barriers framing in the background. Once I was satisfied with the placement, it was time to start building. A big thanks to my friend Solomon over at 11 Charlie Scale Modeling for designing and printing these HESCO barriers. The detail on them is incredible, and they were perfect for this scene. If you'd like a set for your own diorama, be sure to check out the link in the description below. As with most of my projects, the first step was a coat of black primer. It might not look like much at this stage, but this is where the transformation really begins. The black primer creates the shadows and the depth that will bring the figure and the terrain to life later on. With the primer dry, it was time to start bringing the HESCO barriers to life. For the base color, I chose Vallejo brown sand and then followed it up with Iraqi sand to create some highlights and give them that sun-faded, dusty appearance you'd expect to see on a combat outpost in Afghanistan. With the fabric portion of the HESCOs painted, it was time to pick out the metal cages. Using a light, dry brush of Vallejo gunmetal gray, I carefully highlighted the wire mesh. This helped bring out all the detail and gave the barriers the worn look you'd expect to see on a combat outpost. Next, I moved on to the figure. As usual, I paint him using my Multicam color consisting of German camo beige, World War II, Lafayette, camouflage green, uniform green, German camo pale brown, chocolate brown, black brown, pale sand, and flat earth. Because I've covered the Multicam painting process a few times already, I didn't stop and show every color transition in this video. If you'd like to see the full process from start to finish, including how I place the pattern and highlights, check out my Multicam tutorial linked in the description below. It also goes into much more detail than I'll cover here. Since the gloves are painted in flat earth to represent coyote brown, there was no need to use my skin tone colors on the hands. Instead, I only painted the face and head using burnt red followed by brown sand highlights. It's a quick and simple recipe that gives the figure a realistic appearance without requiring a lot of extra work. For the barrel, I went ahead and dry brushed gunmetal gray, and I think it turned out really well. I then painted chocolate brown in the barrel and on the steering stick. With the figures complete, I turned my attention to the groundwork. For the base, I used Vallejo Diorama FX Desert Sand Texture Paste. This product is great for creating realistic desert terrain and really has a nice gritty texture straight out of the container. Before the desert sand texture paste had a chance to dry, I carefully placed all the components back onto the base. This allowed the figure, burn barrel, and HESCO barriers to settle naturally into the terrain, ensure everything sat flush with the ground. I sprinkled sand across the base to introduce different textures and make the terrain feel more natural. After that, I carefully sprayed everything with diluted Mod Podge to secure it in place. With most of the groundwork locked in place, I began painting some of the larger rocks using Vallejo's flat earth. This gave them a solid base color and helped separate them from the surrounding sand. Next, I dry brushed Vallejo Iraqi sand across the entire base. This highlighted the texture of the sand and the rocks while helping unify all the different elements into a dusty Afghanistan-style environment. I felt like the burn barrel area needed a little more character, so I mixed some black and white paint to create a grayish, ash-like color and lightly dry brushed it around the base of the barrel. This helped represent soot and ash buildup from repeated use and made the scene feel a bit more realistic. I gave the entire base a light dry brush of Vallejo deck tan. This helped catch the highest points of the terrain and added another layer of depth to the groundwork. I finished off the groundwork by applying Vallejo Desert Dust pigment across the entire base. I focused on the terrain and rocks, and of course the HESCO barriers. Dust has a way of settling on everything in these environments, so this step helps unify all the different elements and make them feel like they belong in the same scene. And with that, the unfortunate private was complete. While this might not be the most heroic moment for a deployment, it's often the small, everyday experiences that veterans remember the most. The strange jobs, the stories that sound unbelievable to civilians, and the moments everyone laughs about years later. This little scene was inspired by one of the stories and serves as a reminder that somebody always gets volunteered for the jobs that nobody wants, like burn and poop with JP8. If you enjoyed this project, be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more military figures, vehicles, and diorama builds. I also love to hear from my fellow veterans in the comments. What was the worst detail you ever got assigned? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.